Here it is, chapter 10. And the name of chapter 10 in our book, One Wintry Night, is The First Christmas. So we're finally at the chapter that has the story that we've been waiting to hear. Well, we've been hearing all about why we needed that very first Christmas. Okay, you're going to love this picture. Look at that. Isn't it beautiful? That's Mary and Joseph. Remember, they had to go to Bethlehem. And this is them on their trip. Okay. What if we had lived in Bethlehem at the time Jesus was born? Our story might have been like that of a boy named Aaron and his little sister Anna. They loved all the excitement in this normally sleepy town. There was something going on everywhere they looked. And the people, they had never seen so many people. Out on the narrow, crowded street, dusty men tugged and shouted at heavy-laden donkeys. Aaron grinned to himself as he watched the sweat make stripes on their faces. Women with tiny children were everywhere. Older children were lugging bundles of food. Everyone looked weary, since the only reason they had come was to pay unfair taxes. Aaron and Anna's favorite place was the city gate. Late one afternoon, they climbed up onto the sun-warmed wall to watch the strangers come into town. Alone and in groups, the people arrived, some walking rapidly on this last part of their journey. An old man at the gate said a few of the travelers were from as far away as Nazareth. Aaron could hardly believe it. They must have spent 4 or 5 nights sleeping beside the road. The afternoon sun felt good on Aaron and Anna's backs, for the air was a little chilly. Anna became sleepy and closed her eyes. Minutes later, Aaron nudged her and she awoke. 2 people were coming up the dusty road in the valley, a man walking and a woman riding a donkey. They traveled so slowly. The woman had her hand on the man's shoulder, and she seemed very tired. The man kept looking at her anxiously. As the couple drew closer, Aaron and Anna could see that their donkey was covered in dust. They had come a long way. But why did they stop so often when their trip was almost over? They paused again right in front of the gate. The woman looked up at the children and smiled. Their hearts filled with wonder. The young woman's face, her eyes great pools of darkness, was pale with exhaustion, but it held a tender smile that made the children forget taxes and Roman soldiers and even Caesar Augustus himself. In hot, noisy, crowded Bethlehem, her smile seemed to say that all the joy in heaven had come down to earth. That night, wrapped up in his cloak, Aaron couldn't sleep. All he could think of was that smile, that incredible smile. It was unusual those days to see a happy face, much less a beautiful smile. He wondered if the man and the woman had found a place to sleep. Aaron stirred restlessly. He somehow knew that this was a special night. Something wonderful, he sensed, was about to happen. Something so wonderful, he was almost hesitating to breathe. If you know the story of Christmas, this picture will remind you of the shepherds out in their field. Bethlehem was very still. On other evenings, donkeys brayed in their stables and wolves howled from the hilltops. But even the donkeys and the wolves were quiet. The wind itself had stopped blowing. It was as if the whole world was listening, waiting. Late, very late, there was a commotion outside. Men were shouting and running, their sandals scuffing on the dirt. Aaron poked Anna, his finger on his lips. Quietly, the children jumped to their feet and ran to the door. They stared at the men talking so loudly in the middle of the night. Not only their shaggy hair and their ragged robes, but also their smell marked them as shepherds, probably the outcast shepherds that kept watch over the sheep outside of Bethlehem, the sheep chosen for temple sacrifices. But what were they saying? They had seen an angel? Aaron looked at them again to make sure they were really shepherds and not crazy people. We saw an angel, they repeated. The angel told us about a baby being born in Bethlehem, a baby called Savior and Lord. They had just seen that baby with their very own eyes. He was in a cave that the innkeeper used for a stable. Oh, that's the bright light in the field that was the angels that the shepherds saw. No wonder it made them afraid. Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. Aaron didn't wait to hear more. Grabbing Anna's hand, he took off down the street as fast as he could run. Anna's short legs could hardly keep up with his longer ones. They ran past houses where drowsy people stumbled out their doors to see what all the racket was about. Panting, they finally reached the cave and peered in. There she was, the woman with the radiant smile. She was lying on the soft hay piled beside one of the stalls. Her eyes were closed, but her peaceful smile filled the cave with wonder. The man knelt beside her and covered her gently with his cloak. Next to them, in the feeding trough for the cows, lay the baby. He seemed so tiny, wrapped tight in a long linen band and sleeping soundly like any other baby. He slept as though the world had not waited thousands of years for this moment, as though Aaron's and Anna's lives and those of everyone on earth were not all wrapped up in his birth, as though all sin and sorrow of the world were not his concern. Aaron wondered if he dared speak to the young mother, but he didn't want to disturb her. He wanted to ask her if he could touch the baby. Not to wake him, but just to touch him. Then Aaron looked at his own grubby hands. He couldn't remember when he last washed them, so he tucked them behind his back and just looked. Aaron glanced at Anna. Little Anna was on her knees, her hands clasped together, a look of surprise and joy on her face. Tears were trickling down her grimy little cheeks. Aaron knelt beside her. I have a picture to show you. It's so beautiful. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? That's Christmas, my friends. That's Christmas. And that's the end of the chapter. But we do have one more chapter in our book, so come back tomorrow to hear the last part of the story.